There is a range of doxastic belief states that is broader than often assumed. While a specific doxastic state might be difficult to discern without scrutiny, it is reasonable to assume that most people act in good faith and strive for rationality, unless they demonstrate otherwise. Therefore, the answer to the question "what am I thinking?" ought to be something that is internally consistent. Let us look at the gumball analogy. You are presented with a jar full of gumballs. Inside the jar, there are only whole gumballs. The jar is packed to the top with these gumballs. The only thing we know about the jar of gumballs is what we can see. We have no way of knowing how many gumballs there are in the jar, at least not without opening it up and counting them. Now, because we understand numbers, we can claim an analytic truth: the number of gumballs in the jar is even, or it is not. However, when we come together to reason about beliefs, we must also acknowledge that there is a distinction between the truth value of a proposition and belief in the proposition. It is the case that the number of gumballs is even, P, E, or it is not, P, not E. In the case of P, E, one could positively believe in the proposition, expressed as B, E, or one could not, expressed as not B, E. It is a similar operation for P, not E, which produces B, not E, and not B, not E. If this is the case, is there any fault in concluding that the range of beliefs for one proposition can multiply to 4? The answer being no, I continue. And for ease of the example, I will from this point express not E as O. That is, the number of gumballs in the jar is even, or it is odd. If I am now actively considering the proposition while regarding someone else who is also considering it, what can I deduce about their belief? Let us first establish an exhaustive set of belief states for the proposition. There seem to be 6 belief states, a subset of rational belief states and a subset of irrational belief states. Starting with the irrational belief states. B, E, and B, O. Believing that the number is both even and odd is a contradiction. Not B, E, and B, E. This is a self-contradiction. Not B, O, and B, O. Another self-contradiction. A rational person evaluating the number of gumballs would not hold or wish to express these belief states because they are logically inconsistent. This leaves us with B, E, and not B, O. Believing that the number of gumballs is even while lacking a belief that it is odd. B, O, and not B, E. Believing that the number of gumballs is odd while lacking a belief that it is even. Not B, E, and not B, O. Lacking belief in both propositions. It is interesting to note that since E and O are mutually exclusive, if someone holds a belief in one, they necessarily lack a belief in the other. This leads us to include 2 inferences. B, E, therefore not B, O. If one believes the number is even, they do not believe it is odd. B, O, therefore not B, E. If one believes the number is odd, they do not believe it is even. However, it is important to note that a lack of belief in a proposition, not B, E, does not entail holding a positive belief in its negation, B, O. This entailment fails by presenting the counterexample of not B, E, and not B, O, which is a rational position that does not contain a contradiction. Now, let's consider 2 people engaging with the proposition, Charlie and Davis. Charlie is a rational thinker who approaches the question systematically. When asked, "Do you believe the number of gumballs is even?" Charlie considers the question and responds with either yes, no, or I don't know. Yes, I believe the number is even. B, E, and not B, O. No, I think it's odd. B, O, and not B, E. I have no idea. Not B, E, and not B, O. Given the lack of significance for the proposition and the minimal impact a belief has on it, I would thank Charlie for engaging in the conversation and move on. Nothing is lost if Charlie does not accurately express their doxastic state to my satisfaction. Now, let us introduce Davis, who interacts with the proposition very differently. If Davis expresses a contradiction, such as the number of gumballs is both even and odd, or it is the case that the number of gumballs is and isn't even, then I would wonder if Davis misspoke, if I misunderstood, or if Davis is in fact expressing an irrational belief. If the latter, is this a jest, or is it a sincere expression? Again, given the lack of significance, I might just laugh it off, thank Davis for the conversation, and move on. The flight of fancy or mistake of one person isn't necessarily mine to share. There are, of course, more nuanced answers to the proposition, which are currently beyond the scope of this discussion, such as levels of confidence or credence, I believe odd with a confidence of 89%, etc. This is a review of classical propositional logic, and I hope to review such fuzzy logic in future discussions. In a final strange case, suppose Davis aggressively responds, "You can't trust people when they express their beliefs, so I'm not telling you." While this is a response, it does not address the question. I might conclude that Davis simply does not wish to engage with it and instead has an entirely different discussion in mind, one for which I have little warning. If Davis persists, insisting that people who say they have no idea are either delusional or lying, I would be forced to conclude that he is steering the conversation toward epistemic absurdity by denying the legitimacy of belief suspension. While Davis might have gotten under my skin, little harm has been done to me. However, there are scenarios where his behavior could betray my confidence or even cause real harm in relation to a proposition. Consider a case where Davis is my doctor, examining a growth that could be cancerous. If the proposition is this growth cancerous, then his refusal to disclose a well-supported diagnosis would be unethical. Likewise, if Davis disregards proper epistemic standards, either by refusing to form a conclusion when sufficient evidence is available or by asserting a diagnosis without adequate justification, his actions could be just as harmful. It is worth noting that belief informs action. While a person's belief state might seem like a purely abstract matter, it can have real-world consequences. If someone holds an irrational belief, it may not remain confined to thought alone. It could influence decisions and behaviors in ways that matter. This is especially relevant when beliefs lead to actions that cause harm or obstruct rational inquiry. While this article focuses on the structure of doxastic states, the connection between belief and action is an important consideration for future discussion. In short, there is a range of doxastic belief states a rational person could hold regarding a single proposition. There is also a sub-range of belief states that a rational person might consider but would exclude from their conclusions due to inconsistencies or contradictions. Denying the validity of withholding belief, not B, E, and not B, O, contradicts the basic principles of rational inquiry. Finally, good faith interlocutors can have a discussion about propositions and beliefs without descending into solipsistic reasoning. Going back to the impetus of this article. If I know that Davis lacks belief that there is an even number of gumballs, not B, E, and I presume he is a rational thinker, then it is reasonable to infer that he does not simultaneously believe there is an even number of gumballs, B, E, as this would be a contradiction.